joyful Dusara. My pronunciation probably isn't correct. I read up a little bit on the meaning of today's celebrations, the ending of Durga Puja, and the celebration of Rama's defeat over Ravana. And that this has been celebrated for so many thousands of years. Interesting. The things that we celebrate, the great events in history, and what their meaning is to us. And so often these celebrations are turned into social festivals, and they're connected to the religion. And so we do various ceremonies, we go through the motions. Yesterday, I believe, the tradition was, particularly the kids, they go around and they get the halwa and something else. What else?
Puri and pudding.
The puris, yes, the puris and the halwa. And many of the actions that we take when we participate in these long-standing traditions, they can oftentimes become quite surface. It can become a social process. And even though it has a spiritual root, we don't necessarily connect to that root deeply. And in fact, if you look at all the religions of the world, you find that most people don't practice them very deeply. They take on a certain outward nature, a certain culture, and then they go through the motions. And they may go through those motions very sincerely, but not necessarily deeply. I observed this in many temples that I visited in India, and how people may come great distance to the temple. I observed this many years ago in the 70s. I went on to Amarnath on pilgrimage. And getting to Amarnath is no small feat. You really have to be committed to going there, especially if you walk. If you do the walk yourself, it's quite arduous. But I saw how people would go. Many maybe had saved up for many years so that they could go on this pilgrimage. And then they would finally get there after usually at least 3 days of very challenging climbing. And they would arrive at the cave, and 15, 20 minutes later they would leave. And what had they done during that 15 or 20 minutes? They made their offering, and they got blessed by the pujari, and they got a little string tied around their wrist. And this whole arduous journey, this culmination of possibly of a lifetime dream to go to Amarnath, was given 15 or 20 minutes attention. And only much of that time was looking around. Oh, what a beautiful place. If we want to receive as much as God, what God wants to give us in the spiritual life, we have to give it our attention. If we arrive at the banquet table, but we don't consider everything that's offered, we won't have taken advantage of that which is present. All of the spiritual life is really about becoming more consciously present to the truth of what is taking place in life. And where does life take place? Most people think that life takes place out here, outside. But life is really taking place inside. Inside ourselves. This is where the battle between Rama and Ravana really takes place. Was it a real battle? We are led to believe so. But it's also, as in the Mahabharata, the Bhagavad Gita, it's an internal battle. It's the battle between the God presence in us and the power of Maya to draw us out into the world, to become confused, to become selfish, to become self-involved in a way that leads us away from the joy of spirit instead of closer to that reality. It makes us think that I am a body, I am a shopkeeper, I am a mother, I am a householder, I am a renunciate. All these outward definitions are not the truth of who we are. There is only one truth. The truth is that we are all spirit. But we have become hypnotized. We have become attracted to this world. So don't forget when these celebrations come up throughout the year to internalize them, to connect them in the deepest way that you can for soul transformation. Not just celebration, but transformation. One of the ways that we do this in the spiritual life is to practice what Patanjali in the Eightfold Path described as svadhyaya, self-study. And in Swami Kriyananda's book, Sadhu Beware, in which he describes many of the attitudes that are necessary for the most powerful self-transformation. If we really want to remember ourselves as spirit, we have to release ourselves from the limitations of thought that we currently live in. And so one of the things that he described was, and it's fun, he says, how to be an attitude detective. And of course we know that a detective spends a lot of time snooping around, looking around. What's going on here? What's the truth of this situation? This is something that we need to do, but inside of ourselves. We need to be to look at our attitude, to look at the way that we are reacting to the current circumstances that we have in our lives. How's the weather inside? How's the battle going? What's going on inside myself? How am I receiving the life experiences that God is giving me? And how is that turning me towards Rama or Ravana inside myself? There's a fun story that Kriyanandaji tells in the Path about a day when he was out in the desert with Yoganandaji at 29 Palms. And Kriyanandaji and one of the other disciples, Norman, they were digging a swimming pool for Master. And it was hot. They were sweating, they were tired. And they had been at work for some time. And it was lunchtime, and they began to think with building enthusiasm that they could take a break and they could have a nice lunch. But just as they were about to be finished, the Master came out. And Master said, "Oh, look at all these piles of dirt. You've been very industrious. But these piles don't look so good. I wonder what we could do to make them look nicer. Why don't you grab that big piece of wood there, that 2x4 wood, and see if you can drag it along the top and flatten it out a little bit, spread it out a little bit." So they adjusted their minds to seeing if this experiment would work. Of course, moving the earth with the piece of wood was also quite strenuous. But they were young, they were strong, they did it. And Master looked at their accomplishment and went, "Very good. This is very good. Why don't we just do one more?" So they did another one. And then, of course, the play really began. Because each time they finished, the master would just say, oh, just one more. Just one more. And Kriyanandaji began to watch his mind, and he began to listen to Norman, who began to grumble. His attitude began to change from, oh, isn't this cute? Isn't this fun? To, this is really way too much work. What are we doing here in the desert? Pushing the dirt around. And what does this have to do with discipleship? And just one more, just one more. And Norman began to grumble. And finally, Kriyananda's mind caught on to the Leela, to the play. And he stood up and he laughed. And then Master said, good, I was playing with you. Let's go eat. We think, where is the spiritual life taking place? And most of the time we think, well, the spiritual life takes place in the temple. The spiritual life takes place in the meditation room. The spiritual life takes place when I'm reading the scriptures or some other spiritually guiding book. But could that be true? Is that the only time that the spiritual life is taking place? Isn't God always present by definition? So therefore, if God is always present, the spiritual life is always taking place. But we tend to categorize, oh, now, of course, I'm eating breakfast or I'm eating lunch. Now I'm at work. Now I'm at this, I'm at that. We don't think, now I'm at work, spiritual life. Now I'm eating breakfast, spiritual life. Now I'm being criticized, spiritual life. Now I'm feeling very uncomfortable, spiritual life. And this is the change between the worldly mind and the spiritual consciousness. Is that we begin to recognize that virtually every experience in life is the spiritual life. I'd like to read, because it's not very long, and Swamiji says it so clearly. How to be an attitudes detective. Watch your heart. That is where attitude reveals itself for what it is. Right attitude will lift your energy from the heart toward the spiritual eye. A wrong attitude will depress the heart's energy and pull it down toward the base of the spine. When a wrong attitude intrudes itself, you may actually feel the energy draining downward from the brain first and then downward from the heart. Right attitude will bring you inner harmony, peace, and contentment. Wrong attitude, on the contrary, will bring you to disharmony and an inner sense of heaviness. Attitude is the most important thing on the spiritual path. Wow. Attitude is the most important thing on the spiritual path. That's an incredible statement. When your attitude is good, you'll be able to sail through every test, often even without realizing it was a test. When your attitude is wrong, on the other hand, everything will seem to be a test. When our attitudes are wrong, all of life is a test. That part was me. You can find in even kindly smiles some cause for irritation. Even when people are being nice to us, we can have a negative attitude when we're caught in that downward flowing energy. Watch the directional flow of your energy, especially in the spine. Whatever your reason tells you, if the energy moves downward, know that there is something wrong, and wrong with you. As my guru said to one of my fellow monks, whenever you see wrong in the world, remember it's wrong with you. When you are right, everything is right because you see God there. The thing that makes right action right is that it's Dharma. It's God's positive energy flow through you into the world. Ravana was killing, Rama was going to kill Ravana. In the West, we've been taught, thou shalt not kill, ahimsa. And yet, in that moment, it was a righteous action because it represented the power of good to overcome the power of evil. In our own consciousness, we at times must take stern control of ourselves and say, I must change myself. This, we practice self-discipline in the variety of ways that we do in the spiritual life in order to get control of the most important thing, our attitude. There are 3 books that come to mind that I really encourage you to spend some time with in regards to understanding right attitude. A Whispers from Eternity by Master, and of course Kriyanandaji's edited version of that as well. Either one, they both have their very powerful, strong points to them. Scientific Healing Affirmations by Master, and Affirmations for Self-Healing by Kriyanandaji. In these books, each one of these affirmations and prayer demands basically addresses an attitude that is common in the human condition and turns it into a positive. It teaches us how to switch from whatever we're feeling, turn it into a positive. Redirect that energy into a greater closeness to spirit rather than something that keeps us separate. We have to be aware of, this is one of the great things about the path of Kriya Yoga, is that we begin to become aware of this energy flow. Very few people talk about this, and it's like a compass. It's just a very clear directional aid to understanding what's going on inside of us. When we feel energy going in, flowing in and up the spine to the spiritual eye, and we feel the corresponding positive qualities of consciousness that go with that, calmness, joy, peace, all of the 8 attributes of God, ultimately. In the Gita, Krishna tells Arjuna to be even-minded and cheerful. And this is the general attitude of the yogi in all circumstances, to be even-minded and cheerful. Doesn't matter what's going on, even-minded and cheerful. That is the basic feeling that we should have. When we're not feeling that, we should look to see inwardly why not. And when you make a practice of feeling that way, then, like in the reading, you often don't even notice that there was a bump in the road because you're so busy feeling just generally good. But if you don't make a practice of feeling this inner equanimity, then we have to catch ourselves. Remember the story in the path where Yoganandaji had come back to the ashram, and Kriyanandaji hadn't seen him in some time. So he came up with a reason to get near, to see if he could create some communication. And so he decided to fill the water bottle, and he made a lot of noise trying to do that, and hoping that Yoganandaji would oh, hi, and greet him. But that never happened. And so when he realized that wasn't going to happen, his attitude, his mind process shifted from, oh, it's going to be so great to see Master, to oh, he doesn't care about me. I'm nothing. I'm no one. I'm just another servant around the building. I have no real purpose here. And he left the room and he walked back to his own room and he realized that he was in a mood. He had let his mind turn down. So what did he do? He went into his meditation room and he put his mind in the spiritual eye, and in just a few minutes, it all came back. Of course, he was busy. What if everybody had to be greeted every day, all day long? When would Master, do the things that he needs to do? Suddenly, he realized that the storm that had been created in his mind was his own creation, had nothing to do with truth. In truth, no matter what circumstance we find ourselves in, we can be at peace. It's our nature to be at peace. It's our nature to have positive feelings. If you see two children arguing, you go, oh, that's what kids do sometimes. It's not a big deal. Even if they start, the little young boys, they start hitting each other. Oh, you intercede probably, but it's not a big deal. You don't make a big deal out of it. Oh, come on. Because they're kids. But as we grow older, some people never get past that. They still act like children. But even still, the parents, the saints of the world, when they see the grown-up kids arguing, they still don't make a big deal out of it. They still don't overreact. They don't stop seeing that God is present, even in Ravana. What gave Ravana the powers that he had? God. And one of the interesting things about the behind the scenes, who was Ravana and Kumbhakarna? They were Jaya and Vijay. They were great devotees that had gotten themselves into trouble and had to reincarnate. And they were given a choice: 3 incarnations as enemies of God, or 10 incarnations as devotees. And they chose 3 because it was less time away from God. And not only that, but they were blessed to be killed by the Lord himself. Yeah. A completely different point of view than the worldly mind. That one says, no, I'll come back 10 times and have a good time. Yes, that's the worldly mind. But the devotee's heart is different than that. We must live in our hearts, and we must recognize how it feels to live in God's presence in our hearts. And then pay attention. Is my energy coming up, or is it going down? This is the inner compass. And it's a very practical tool, but you have to learn how to use it. You have to calm the mind. You have to practice self-study. When you practice your meditation, your attunement to the Guru, and you begin to feel, you practice your Kriya, you begin to feel the energy flow more and more clearly. You become aware of how does it, and watch yourself. Say, well, okay, I'm caught, I'm angry. What does this feel like? What did it feel like when it started? This, you feel it, and then pay attention to yourself sometime when you're just feeling good, calm and joyful. Recognize these states of mind, and then it's easier to tell that you're not in it. Oh, I'm not feeling that. Okay, what am I feeling? And then into the center, up to the spiritual eye. When we're not going in the right direction, just reverse it. Take the energy of your frustration, of your challenges, whatever they may be, and turn them and up. And when we practice that the way Kriyanandaji did, just in a few minutes, you can go from being very agitated to being very calm and uplifted, just in a moment. The more control you get over your happiness, over your inner connection. So, in everything that we do in life, we can celebrate all of the spiritual holidays of the world, of the year. And sometimes we celebrate them from other cultures. It's always good to celebrate. I like the affirmation this morning on gratitude. There's always something to be grateful for. But to the devotee, the most important thing to be grateful for is the Guru's grace in our lives, the Guru's presence. And the only way that we can experience that grace is when we attune ourselves with the right attitude. When we're feeling connected to God and Guru, everything's good. Nothing can touch you. But if you're not feeling that, you have nothing. That's when you're poor. True poverty has nothing to do with economy. It's God's presence in our hearts. That is the real goal. So take some time this week and pay attention to your attitude and work with it. Consciously be aware of it, and if you see it going in the down direction, redirect it in the up direction. And if you pay attention to yourself over a period of time, you'll recognize the habit patterns. Oh, when this happens, I tend to react this way. When that happens, I tend to react that way. See, how did you react when somebody, was driving bad in front of you? How did you react when the shopkeeper didn't have that, what you needed? How did you react when the relative told you a story you didn't want to hear? How did you react? All of these reactions, be aware of them, and then gradually, the more we are aware of how we've been reacting, we can shift the way that we react to the positive, to the God-connected, to the joy-connected, to the Guru-connected reactions. And then we have happiness. No matter what happens outwardly, we have a growing happiness inside of ourselves. And that becomes the essential atmosphere in which we live. God presence. So be an attitude detective this week and see what you can find out about yourself.